Today's conversation will cover her pain, turmoil, and a story of redemption. Her dad, Steve Znachko, is a friend of mine, and he's with me in studio. Steve, thanks so much for joining us here on Christian Newsmakers.
Privileged to be here. Sorry it's taken a little bit of while, but you've been very patient.
That's
I'm
okay.
Glad to be here.
August 21st marks 2 years since Anna's passing.
Yes.
What has this been like for you to lean on your faith during this period of grief?
Yeah, great question. We've been leaning on our faith, and I would say it's common to leaning on our faith just heavier, just in a bigger way, in a way we've always had to lean our faith, which is, you understand, just kind of waiting on God.
Yeah.
There are times, and that sounds so cliche, but there are times when you just have to wait in the hard till he shows up.
Right.
And we've done a lot of waiting in this 2 years. And for instance, we were warned that year 2 is harder than year 1, which was kind of surprising to us. Like, how can year 2 be harder? And grief counselors explained and said, in year 1, you have some of the relief that she's no longer suffering. In year 2, that relief is gone, and all you do is miss your daughter.
I see.
And so we wait on God, and he comes and fills the emptiness that we sometimes feel, the turmoil of the 18-year journey that he's beginning to be clarifying and healing. And so, but like, life goes on. I had to have surgery back surgery 2 days after Anna's funeral. And then I was hospitalized and then had to have another major surgery. And Linda's just been through a year of struggle in that. And then 3 days ago, our kid's house ends up in a flood. Everybody's got this ongoing thing. And so I just feel like there is this consistency in the scriptures of waiting on God. And in the Psalms, it says, when you wait on God, he bends to hear us. And that's how I would describe the last 2 years. He bent to hear us. And then it says he lifted us out of the miry clay, out of the destruction. He put our feet on the rock, and he made our footsteps firm. And that's the best way I can describe the 2 years of the process. And he's just been doing that ongoing.
Yeah. Let's give our viewers an idea about Anna. As we put up some pictures about your daughter, tell us a little bit about Anna.
Anna was someone that we all in the family described as wonderfully unique. And she very much embraced that description.
Right.
She, I like to say there was music playing that only Anna heard. And there was a video going on that Anna lived that sometimes only Anna was seeing.
Yeah.
And that was delightful to watch played out. And sometimes really magical, and sometimes we didn't know where we were going with her. But it was always a great journey.
What were some of your favorite memories of Anna?
Yeah, I think one that kind of tells her story a little bit is the kids and I have 3 other children too, and we would play scramble, fairly simple game in our backyard, where just one team picks up the ball, and I would walk Anna through the instructions. I'm just like, Anna, that's our goal. When we pick up the ball, our goal is to run to that goal and stop at that goal, and here are the boundaries, and I set them in the backyard. And the kids would always say, when I said, do you want to play scramble? They'd say, yes, but Anna has to be on your team. and then we would go through these rules, and inevitably, a memory I have is Anna picking up the ball, right after that explanation of the rules, running to the wrong goal, running to the wrong fence, dropping the ball, and then just singing out loud. And the kids just looked at me and were like, see, that's why. And that kind of describes Anna and the video she was living in and the music that she was hearing that none of us were. But it's kind of important for me to say that although the kids said, you got to be on Anna's team to play that game, my kids for the entire 18-year struggle were on Team Anna for the whole rest of her life.
That's beautiful.
And it was wonderful to watch.
Yeah. At what point did she have anorexia? At what point did she discover that this was a thing for her?
That's actually a great question, and it's almost a period because actually the medical field, this is 18 years ago, and there's been some advances, but anorexia is still one of the most unknown, confusing diseases that there's just so little known about it.
Okay.
And so Linda actually was the one who diagnosed Anna.
So this is your wife, Linda, right?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
My wife, Linda, diagnosed Anna because what it starts to show up as is that it starts to show up as complaining of stomach aches, complaining about being able to eat, and that leads to what is called restricting diet.
Okay.
And the medical field, and that's not a critical of the medical field, but they embrace it in the same way. So gastroenterologists were saying maybe she's got irritable bowel syndrome. There's allergy testing. You should withdraw dairy. So actually all of the medical field unintentionally gave her permission to restrict more and more food groups.
I see.
Because it was taken as a physical. It was Linda who came to me one day and did the research and said, I think our Anna has anorexia.
And how was she treated, and how did that go for your family?
Oh gosh, well, 18-year journey. Treatments started, it's a confusing route, Scott, because sometimes even the medical field will say that the treatment can be as dangerous as the disease. Because the treatments are so uncertain. And so like one doctor friend said to me when we got to the point where we thought we had to send her, we knew we had to send her away because she was getting worse and worse and worse. And the changing time was when Linda came and we had found a place in Virginia, the #1 place in the world for treating anorexia. And Anna was getting sicker and sicker. And so it was coming to the point where we knew if we didn't stop the lack of intake, she was going to die. And I called her up in our room because I resisted sending her to treatment. I never wanted to send her away. Neither did Linda, but Linda was like, we have to. Linda was a little bit stronger than me at that point and knew, like mothers often knew, this is to the point. And I called Anna in and I said, honey, and the last thing Anna ever wanted to do was leave our family. And I talked to her and she's like, I don't want to leave and I don't want to leave. I said, I don't want you to leave. And we talked about how could we get you to stay? We'll get involved with horses. We came up with all these activities, all these things. And she kind of lit up and said, yes, that's what we'll do. And I said, sweetheart, all you got to do then is eat this half a piece of dry toast. And I mean an inch of banana. And I said, all you have to do is eat that and you can stay home. And she tried, Scott, for 30 minutes and never could eat just that one piece of toast or that banana. Wow. And we knew at that time we had to take her.
Right.
And so the hardest trip of our life was the first time. It was one of six or seven inpatient times, and these were intense and long. And this first one, we went to Virginia, and I remember driving in, and the driveway said, it was a Christian facility, the driveway said, expect miracles. And we did, like we walked in. But as a dad, it was one of the most heartbreaking times because we were dropping Anna off and she looked at me and she said, you promised me you would never leave me. And I had promised her as a dad. I said, I will never leave you. And she was looking at me as I was walking out the door at the facility. And she said, you promised me you'd never leave me.
Gosh.
And then Linda and I drove out, Scott, with the rent-a-car, and we were driving back to the airport to fly back. And we stopped at a gas station. And I'll never forget this. My poor wife, it was raining. It was a real little gas station, pulled in. And Linda got out of the car and came around and grabbed my chest and started pounding on it saying, we have to go back. We have to go get her. And just weeping, like a mother's weep that I've just never heard. And I grabbed her and we stood there in the rain and we knew we couldn't go back and get her.
Right.
And that was the first of 6 rounds.
Wow.
One of which got to the point which was her last round of treatment. And the intensity of the treatment's kind of important to this story because a lot of people have a hard time accepting that it is terminal. But this does get to the point of terminal. But her last treatment, she got within 3 or 4 days of dying, and we had to angel flight her to Denver, which is the only facility in the world at that point that knew how to save her because she was so sick.
Right.
And so normal stay at acute in Denver was 3 weeks. Anna was there for 6 weeks. Then another 6 months at a retreat or outpatient treatment center. So it was a journey for me, Linda, and my children.
Yeah.
This had a huge toll on our family.
you guys are a Christian family.
Yes.
Anna, during this part, she is a Christian.
Yes.
How are you all dealing with what she is going through and your faith? Because you're obviously praying that
Yes.
Anna would be relieved from this anorexia, that she'd be healed, right?
Yes. Oh,
So
gosh.
what is that like for your faith, and also trying to provide encouragement and faith for your daughter?
Praying constantly, believing especially early on, that she would be healed.
Yeah.
Never having a doubt, never entering into it that this would be fatal. That took many, many years. There were just things along the way. And if you look strictly, I'm trying to do this journey as honestly as a Christian as I possibly can.
Sure.
If you look just at the prayer answers in relation to this disease, you'd have a hard time building a case for answered prayer until the very end, where Anna was redeemed. I don't have a problem, and I don't think God has a problem with me saying that. I just don't want to come across as every time we prayed,
I see.
those were answered.
Understand.
He stayed with us, which was critical. He held our family together.
Right.
But in terms of the things we were asking, they were not answered in the way that we asked many, many times. And in this case, it meant that our daughter was just continuing to get sicker and sicker and sicker. And this disease isn't just about illness. It was taking her life as well. Socially, lost all friendships.
Yep.
Lost the ability to sit around a table. Imagine trying to live when you can't eat and share a meal with somebody. So it was stealing not just her life physically, but her whole life was being stolen minute by minute, day by day, week by week.
One thing that happened was this key turning point in Anna's journey. This was a time when Anna decided to not pursue further treatment. Steve, tell us about that.
Yeah. So important, 18 years, 6 or 7 inpatient treatments, probably 12 to 14 what they call intensive outpatient teams, which means every time she came out of treatment, she had a nutritionist, she had a therapist, she had a psychiatrist. So there wasn't a minute in 18 years that we weren't treating the disease. It culminates in this angel flight to Denver and coming back out of Denver, and each of the treatments were traumatic.
Yeah.
The treatment is harsh. It has to be, I guess, but in many ways it causes as much, I shouldn't say as much, it causes trauma along with the disease.
Okay.
And so we just saw this cycle of just getting better. Well, I should say putting on weight.
Sure.
And then coming back, and then in a short time, even under all this care, that she would get worse. And this happened after this last time out of angel flights, and it just got so distressing to her to say, I've been to the #1 facility. I've been to she's been to that many of the outpatient facilities. To be honest with you, we couldn't even get another inpatient, to take her anymore.
Wow.
And that's not a knock against them. It's just that they knew that Anna was most likely going to die. And the fatality then goes on their record of treatment record. And so we had trying to get facilities, and we couldn't even get facilities to take her any longer. So after the Denver experience, she came out and then started cycling downward again, and it just tore her heart out. And one time Linda had a conversation with her, and Anna said, just kind of out of the blue, I just don't want to die alone. And that was the first time that Anna, I think, knew that this was fatal. We did some more research, got involved with some doctors out west that did define that after there is research showing that after 2 or 3 rounds and after this many years and all of that, it is classified as refractory anorexia and it's terminal. And Anna just came and said, she said, I don't want to go to treatment anymore. And that was an intimate conversation, because I said, honey, I need to know that you know when you say that, what that means.
Right.
I said, I need you to know that that means that according to all the statistics and all of that you're going to die. And she said, I know it. She said, but Dad, treatment won't help. And after 18 years, Scott, I didn't have an answer for her. I couldn't say, yes, it will. She would go back into the exact same facilities, exact same care that she had tried for 18 years.
Right.
And so she just realized the treatment that was available, the knowledge was not going to be able to save her. And so I said, but at that time, she still didn't believe she was going to die. She believed she would beat it. She just thought she had the best chance of beating it, staying home, getting family around her, fighting it with her loved ones and all of that. And we just said, okay, as long as you know it's going to take a miracle from God.
Right.
And she said, I know that, and Dad, I'm going to get that miracle.
Wow.
And so she decided to do that, and she fully believed that she would live. And she went into it. We put hospice on because she still needed to be under hospital care, and hospice was hoping she would graduate. Everybody was hoping she would live.
Yeah.
And the reality happened about 4 weeks later. And I would say the time that God flushed in was the night that Anna realized she was going to die.
Oh gosh, Steve.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful story in that Anna, we knew that we would know it wasn't going to work. Anna had a job that loved her. They tried, they gave her several leaves, and they wanted to keep her. They loved her, and she had a boyfriend, and we said she'll either lose her job or her boyfriend, and that will be the sign that we know. And we could see her getting sicker.
Yeah.
And I got a call from her boyfriend one night. Lynn and I were watching TV, and her boyfriend called and said, you need to call Anna about this day. And Lynn and I grabbed hands, we prayed, and I called Anna. And I've never heard anything like it on the phone. Total panic, total frustration, shame, guilt. And I called her and I said, can I come over?
Yeah.
And she said, no one can ever see me again.
Oh gosh.
It was just tragic, Scott. But I need to tell the tragedy of it to be able to tell the redemption of it, because
Please.
the beauty. And so I said to her, what's going on? She told me what had happened that day. And I said, honey, what do you want to do? And she said, I have to try harder, Dad. And I said, you've tried so hard.
Right.
And she said, and she knew what I was saying. And she said, are you telling me I'm going to die? And I said, honey, I've told you the truth all 18 years.
Right.
And yes, because by this point, unless we angel flighted her, I don't even know if that would have helped. And I said, yes, honey, you're going to die. And she screamed into the phone. And she said, so now the disease that stole my life kills me. And she said, Dad, it's my final failure.
Oh gosh.
And I am sitting there weeping. Linda's weeping. We're sitting in the dark in my living room. I don't know what to say. I'm just praying. And then I feel like God did give me the answer. And I said, honey, I don't think it's your failure. I think it's your victory. And Scott, the change in that conversation from total panic to hope, because the next thing out of her mouth was, she said, how? She was asking, is it possible that there's a victory somewhere in here?
Right.
And I said, honey, can I said, I think it's a victory because it'll be the first time that you made a decision over your eating disorder in 18 years. And it doesn't want to just kill you. It wants to keep tormenting and torturing you. And I said, can I tell you some truths? And she didn't really answer. And I just started quoting scripture. And I was in the dark, and I just quoted scripture. And I didn't know, honestly, Scott, whether she might say, Dad, not now. I mean, I would have understood it if she just said, not at this point. I quoted scripture over and over, and I did it for about 15 minutes, and she didn't say a word. And the last scripture I quoted was from the thief on the cross, when Jesus said to him, later today, you'll be with me in paradise, which the literal translation is garden.
Yeah.
And Anna was a gardener.
Yes, she was.
Yes.
Yep.
And so I said, honey, Jesus said, later today, you're going to be with him in the garden. And they were silent, and I just stopped, and I said, what's your heart telling you? And she said, that I'm going to die. And she said, and that it's okay. I'm going to live for as long as I can, and then I'm going to die. And then, the sweetest thing happened. She said, would you and Mom come tuck me in? She had started the conversation with, no one can ever see us.
Yeah.
She invited us to come tuck her in, and
Wow.
we anointed her with oil.
Wow.
And we prayed over her that night. And what I'm trying to describe is what started as a total tormented conversation of hopelessness and failure turned to peace and come tuck me in. And that peace that we saw that night never left her until the time we were by her bedside and she took her last breath.
Wow.
I'm not kidding. The next 4 months were the best months of her life, even though the disease didn't leave her, and the peace of God never left her. I thought for sure as I journeyed through this, she would at some point say to me, Dad, I can't do this.
Right.
Dad, I want to turn around. Not one time. In fact, the last week of her life, I was taking her on a walk, and I'd put her in the Jeep. It was 80 degrees. We had coats on her and hats. She was so frail at that point. And she couldn't even walk, so I actually put her on my feet, and we went to her favorite trail. And she's looking up in the Jeep with the roof off, and she said, Dad, God is being so good to me.
Wow.
So I watched it. I watched him come in and say, this redemption is going to happen in death. It's the hardest of redemptions,
Right.
but it's the purest and most sacred.
Right.
And I watched my daughter rescued by him saying, this one's going to be done
Wow.
through death.
Wow.
And I don't know that I'll ever be able to fully explain it, but I watched it.
Right. And you know as a Christian
Yeah.
that you will see Anna
Yes.
again. Does that provide hope for you and Linda and the rest of your family?
I don't even know how we'd be doing it without that.
Yeah.
And I want to be honest to be able to say, I've learned that it doesn't completely cover the loss.
Yeah.
It's almost like my best explanation is that they run in kind of two separate lanes. There still is the tragedy of Anna's life.
Sure.
The sadness, and that stays. And this does cover that. But I cannot say that we are able to rejoice every day that Anna's gone and say, well, like we say, yes, we get comfort from where she is, but we still miss her horribly.
Of course.
We still wonder why her life was so tormented and so tragic.
Right.
I still have guilt as a father that I couldn't stop this.
Right.
No matter how hard I try. So it's kind of a both and.
I think as we close out Christian Newsmakers, I wanted to have you address viewers
Yes.
who are perhaps struggling with something. Maybe they're going through a hospice situation with a loved one, or maybe they've lost a loved one. As a Christian, can you please provide some hope for that viewer who is looking for hope in a hopeless situation?
Yes. So my daughter came to me and asked me the hardest thing I've ever been asked when she realized she was going to die. And she said, Dad, you've been strong enough to walk me in my life. Can you be strong enough to walk me into my death? And I wanted to say, no, I can't. But God came alongside in a way. I've been pastored, I've preached, I've taught, I've been all over the world in missions. I'm telling you, this is the time he came closest and said to me, watch, you're going to need to lean on me more than you've ever, and I'm going to walk you into the sacred. And Scott, I'm talking about walks with my daughter where she said, Dad, I need to ask you, how much is it going to hurt to die? Like, just the actual dying, how much is it going to hurt? How's God going to think about my life since I was sick for so long of it? We had those sacred conversations. I would go for walks when she couldn't walk with friends. I had to go to her and say, honey, you can't walk with friends anymore because it was predicted she might die. So you can't do that to your friends.
Right.
And she said to me, she said, then will you walk with me? I need you to be okay if I die on the trail. And we would mark out a mile because that's how much I knew I could carry her back. I said, honey, I have to be able to carry you back. And she goes, okay, we'll walk a mile and then we'll turn. Those are hard conversations. And all I want to be able to assure to your question is that the goodness of God in that, as he covered my daughter, he redeemed her life. She had very little relationship when it started. By the end of the 6 months, people were visiting her because they knew what to do with terminal. I watched her joy return.
Yeah.
I watched her personality return. I watched a peace that I still don't understand how a 32-year-old was okay. And I just want to say that I assure you that he will be enough.
Yeah.
And I can't even explain exactly how it's going to look. I just want to say, in some of those hardest places, I watched him be enough over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And that's the promise I can make.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with me.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me
Our
on.
prayers are with you and your family as you mark 2 years here, coming up here on August 21st.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay, Steve Znachko, and that is our latest update of Christian Newsmakers. Thanks so much for joining us.